Thank you. Carry on.
All right, we are recording. All right, so once again, thanks everybody for joining us today. Um, I'll be talking about doing exception reports as a means of managing your GoldMine system, which I think is a topic that um, hopefully touches upon just about everybody who uses GoldMine. There are a lot of issues related to data management and data, what we sort of call data hygiene. Um, that we cover during these sessions, and we try to make them, as broadly interesting as possible to you. And this is one that really comes up a lot because it's something that's fairly easy to set up. It's a great idea to sort of approach your GoldMine database with the idea that I want to have not only have it set up a certain way to support the way we do our work, but I want to also have monitoring mechanisms that allow it to stay in the condition that allow the GoldMine database to stay in the condition that it needs to be, so that we're able to rely upon our GoldMine data and not feel like, I don't even want to bother keeping our data accurate because nobody else is doing it, or because the data itself is just so messed up that it's not really supporting what we're doing. So a quick introduction about who we are. For those of you who are new to MasterMine, MasterMine is a tool set that works with GoldMine. It is we like to call it a management tool set because that's sort of where it starts for managing GoldMine as well as managing the people who use GoldMine. But it is a tool that really can reach all the way down to every kind of end user who needs or uses reports for any purpose.
And Rob, are you wanting to show your screen?
You're telling me I'm not showing my screen yet?
Not yet.
Okay, there we go. That's too bad. You guys missed our wonderful opening screen. I'll give you a quick peek. This is what you should have been seeing while I was talking before. So that is our presentation. Okay, so MasterMine for GoldMine is a tool set that you use for doing reporting with GoldMine, for manipulating your GoldMine data. Both of those things are interrelated because manipulating data is easy to do if it's right there in front of you in your hands where you can get at it. And that's what MasterMine's integration with Excel does. So that as a user, you basically can have your GoldMine information shareable at your fingertips, right there in Excel, which is an environment that most people are comfortable working with data. And when I say most people, I mean non-technical users who, maybe don't know how to write SQL queries, or don't feel that the most efficient thing for them to be doing is trying to write SQL queries and such. But to actually have the information right in front of you where you can work with it and, as I say, make reports for display purposes or do data manipulation, or in a way, what we're talking about today is something a little bit more along the lines even of process management, where we're really talking about supporting the business processes that you set up to do in GoldMine. So I'll mention these three characteristics of MasterMine. The idea of it is you distribute the ability to work with GoldMine data. It doesn't need to be handled only by the IT department. It can and really should be something. Now, that doesn't mean that you give all of the capabilities, of course, to every user. Don't want to overstate that, but essentially when we're talking about distributed, we really mean if end users need information, they should be able to make reports. If they've got a report that's 80% of what they need, they should be able to tweak it for the last 20% to get what they need and not have to go back to the IT department or go through some expensive consulting process to get it. Second thing about MasterMine is that it is GoldMine specific. It's built around the GoldMine data structures. And the third thing is that it's what we call manager friendly, which means that you are if you're not an IT person, but you are the manager of people, you can actually have a good deal of control, both of the capabilities that you distribute to your users, as well as of the reports themselves. Okay, so that's just a very quick introduction to MasterMine itself. Most of you on the call are past MasterMine users at least. So let's get down to the specific problem that we wanted to talk about today, which is data quality, and specifically the solution of doing exception reports that make it work. So the problem, of course, is if you've got GoldMine data and it is deteriorating over time, and that is just simply a fact. If you own GoldMine, it is every day people are putting in data entry errors, information gets imported, mistakes are made, and it's just simply a fact that over time a database deteriorates over time. That being the case, you need to have monitoring capabilities in place. You need to have really the intention and the consciousness of it first, but have monitoring capabilities in place so that you can keep things where they need to be in GoldMine. And over time, you can have your GoldMine data quality actually. But if it's perfect already, keep it perfect. If it's not perfect, move it to where it needs to be and keep it there. The three influences on that, as I mentioned here already, data entry and importing errors. Second kind of major one is the meanings of the information that got put into GoldMine may not be the same to your users today as they were years ago when somebody put it in there. What you mean now by a qualified lead, if you're labeling leads as qualified, may not mean the same thing to your salespeople today that it did to your salespeople several years ago, either because the business rules might have changed, or because the actual people have changed, and new people just consider qualified to be something different. That is something for you at a policy level to agree upon inside your company. And this is something, by the way, I often come back to is your monitoring reports, all of your reports generally are much more valuable to you if you have agreement within your company about what things mean. What does qualified mean? What does a customer mean? Is a customer anybody who's ever bought from you ever, or is it somebody who's bought from you sometime recently? And what does recently mean? Those kinds of things. So without getting too far down into that, obviously there are issues related to data quality that need to be addressed. And the result of that, of course, is you wind up not being well coordinated, not having a well-monitored business process, potentially miss opportunities, they fall through the cracks, and the rest of it is probably something that you're already familiar with, down to the point where people just lose their trust in GoldMine, and you wind up with people just not willing to actually work with GoldMine. It's what we call the GoldMine death spiral. Now, that death spiral is not, of course, unique to GoldMine. Every CRM system has exactly the same problem. I'm just talking to you about this because everybody on this call has GoldMine. So let's talk about the solutions instead. And this is really what's going to be the meat of today's webinar. Now, I want to go through this not speaking at 100 miles an hour as I usually do, so I'm going to try to slow this down a little bit. But what I'm really aiming to do here is talk about some specific exception reports. Exception reports, of course, in concept are pretty simple. They are reports that basically exclude the information that is correct in your database, leaving you with a clear view of the incorrect information that can be easily addressed through the mechanisms that you have in MasterMine, like drill down to the GoldMine records and mass updating with MMUpdater and so on. So how do we make reports that reflect this kind of concept where essentially what we're doing is showing the incorrect information and then fixing it? And I'll talk about several different kinds of things to look for in your exception reports, or things to sort of build your exception reports around. For example, field exceptions. That's a pretty straightforward one. It's what values do we have in our field that don't match the lookups? And I'll talk about the contact type field as a good example of one of those. Then there are field values that are not, they may not be different from the lookups, or you may not be using lookups in a particular field, but they're just not logical because other fields suggest them. So for example, we've got in our demo database here, we've got a last year sales field that we populate actually using Updater we can either populate that from outside, we'll get to that, I guess. But the main thing is, if we're going to consider somebody a customer, then what level of sales or how recent of sales are we going to is going to be our threshold for deciding that someone is a customer. Then there are values dependent on activity in GoldMine. Is someone, for example, a prospect or a suspect based on based on call completion. In other words, you might want to move somebody up from suspect level to prospect level based on the fact that, hey, we've talked to them and we've qualified them. So how do we get that qualification information from history to affect or to sort of double check the setting in our contact type field that says whether they're a prospect or a suspect? And then the last one that I'm listing here is business process violations. Now, you know your own business processes. Hopefully, within your organization, you've worked out exactly what the rules are for defining a customer, a prospect, a suspect, and so on. If you haven't actually done that within your organization and come to agreement among your sales reps, then there's not much to monitor. On the other hand, if you have done that, or if you're in the process of doing that, or you have the ambition to do that, by all means, go ahead and do it, and let's make some monitoring tools for you so that you can enforce it and keep people going along the lines that you've set up. If you don't have business processes, you're not really using your GoldMine. If you do have them, then they really need to be monitored and brought along. So that's the things that I'm going to talk about in practice over in our demo database here. Before I do, I want to put up a quick poll here, and this will be the only one that I do in this session today. And it's a pretty simple question: what is your most pressing data quality issue? And I want you to think about this in terms of, now you may have all of these problems. As a matter of fact, just about every organization that we talk to that's got GoldMine has some level of this as well. But what I'm really asking here is, is the issue, are your issues really based on we import data into GoldMine all the time and we just don't get it right? Or we have some difficulties with it? Is the issue that really internally you just haven't worked out what should the procedures be? The sales reps don't really know what they're supposed to do when they finish a phone call, don't know what the codes are they're supposed to use to indicate a result of I talked to somebody versus I didn't, that sort of thing. Or do you have the procedures, but you just haven't trained the users properly to use them? And then finally, is it just the case that the data is just simply such a mess that nobody's ever really taken on the task of straightening it all out? Now, all of these are things that we can address with MasterMine tools. I'm going to be focusing today, of course, on the exception reports that are your sort of steady state tools for keeping things in the best shape possible while you're working with your GoldMine data, or while you're working with GoldMine. So the assumption is going to be that at least there's going to be some effort made to straighten all this stuff out, and I'll actually give you a couple of tools and tricks for doing that, but that once you have it straightened out, you want to keep it straightened out. Okay, so we've gotten a pretty fair response here, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, give you a look at what we've got in terms of results here. So pretty interesting. The largest number are those who feel that their data confusion is just simply too overwhelming. Your GoldMine database is just simply such a mess that that's the biggest issue. Now, like I said, you might very well have the other issues, and in fact, probably the other issues are ones that fed into this. And I'm going to suggest that what you probably want to do, if you are already MasterMine users, get some help just with some overview reports to dig in and assess the specific issues, and then let's go after it with Updater and straighten out your GoldMine data, because there is just simply nothing easier than getting the information in front of you on the Excel spreadsheet, fixing it, and pushing it to where it needs to be. In some cases, it's a matter of clearing out a lot of junk that doesn't even belong there. Well, we can even help you with that aspect of it as well. Updater can not only change data in place, it can also help you clear out junk that really is just kind of in the way. I won't go into these other ones too much in detail, except to say it's good for you to be conscious of where those issues are, and hopefully you'll be able to apply the techniques that I show you here today to get to some resolution on those. Okay, so with that, I'm going to switch over to our GoldMine, which is there. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Different GoldMine. That one there. Okay, so this will be the usual MasterMine demo database, and what I want to do is I'm going to start with the sort of the simplest end of what I just showed you in this slide, and kind of go through these in detail with some examples. So the first thing that I want to illustrate here is that exceptions reports don't need to be built on the fly all the time. It is useful, of course, that with MasterMine you can do that. They're pretty easy to build, and I will actually illustrate building some from scratch. But the key thing is to think about exception reports are things you come back to and back to all the time. An exception report can be as simple as you're my sales rep. Your job is to, whenever I give you a new lead, to make sure that the key fields, when I say key fields, I'm talking about these: contact type, industry, score, sales rep. You have your own key fields in your GoldMine setup. I want to make sure that every lead that goes into our database, something valid gets put into one of these. And so therefore I have an exception report that each sales rep has available. It's right there on his GoldMine taskbar. All he has to do is pop it open. As he pops it open, it refreshes with the current GoldMine database, so there's no doubt that he's looking at exactly what is current in the GoldMine database. And the way I have this one now, I only have this one set up on 2 of my key fields. I'll do an additional one here to show you how it's done. But it's a very straightforward thing. This is a simple MasterMine main contacts report. In fact, we're only really even using 2 fields here. Actually, I want to go to the contact type field. We're only using 2 fields here, the contact type field and the sales rep field. Now, my reason for doing it this way is, and I actually went to the trouble here of writing out the instructions to myself about how to, or to you really, how to generate this from your starting report. In effect, what I did was I dragged the contact type field into the row area. And in this case, I hid what I consider to be the acceptable values. Now, the acceptable values are the ones that are in my lookup back in GoldMine. So back in GoldMine, I've got customer, employee, other, prospect, and what else? Suspect and vendor. So those are my valid ones. And all I did was I went in, I dragged the contact type field in, I hit the download here, and then I just unchecked the fields, the values that are incorrect. Well, what does that leave me with? That leaves me with a report that every time it refreshes is going to include or display the values that are in here that don't really belong in my database. Now, there's one right here at the bottom, unqualified, that I look at, and it's got a lot of values in there, and I think, well, wait a minute, maybe that's actually a case of a value that's missing from the lookup in GoldMine. That, again, is something that I can manage very easily. In fact, I can just go over here to GoldMine and say, gosh, the contact type lookups ought to include qualified. Or it might actually be the case that qualified really means prospect. So I'm not actually going to add it in there. But I just want to sort of illustrate, sometimes you learn something needs to be set up better in GoldMine. Sometimes you'll learn that the actual data is at issue. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to say qualified really should be prospect. So what am I going to do about that? Well, I'm going to process the things that remain on the sheet here so that everything gets fixed on the GoldMine side. And I'll do that in some using my MasterMine tools here. So for example, for the moment, I'm going to leave the ones that are blank because I don't know what those really should be. But I'm going to take the other ones and going to assume that these are all variations on the word client or customer, all variations on the word customer that really should be fixed on the GoldMine side. Actually, DC, I think, is customer in here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and group these together, use my MasterMine tools for doing that. Now, at the moment, I'm not going to really need to name my groups much because I'm essentially going to fix this data and it won't be there anymore. So I'll just go ahead and use the default names for the groupings. So my ones that really should be clients, I group those together. My ones that really should be prospects, I'm going to group those together. Here we go. And all I'm really trying to do is bring them together so that I can run my MMUpdater process on them. So quickly, I'll roll up my group ones, which should be all say customer, double click on it, change the value inside of Excel, make that same change all the way down the sheet, and then run my updater against it. So you guys all probably know how to do this, but visually at least you're getting a sense of what this looks like in MasterMine if you haven't seen MasterMine before. And quickly, we've straightened out 22 records on the GoldMine side. And just to sort of finish it, I'll fix these prospect ones here as well. There are 32 of those. Get it spelled right. Again, right down the page. Take it off test run. And we've fixed them. So just to verify that we've fixed them now, when I go back to my report, I should be able to refresh this report, and all I should be left with are ones that legitimately say past client and ones that are blank up there in the contact type field. So when I right click to do refresh. Usually in the demos I like to do it this way or in the thing. So I hit refresh, and as you can see, everything that was invalid before is gone. I've properly classified those ones. Now, having used this technique of hiding the correct values in here, I can't immediately see that my numbers still total up to exactly the same thing. I'm going to illustrate here with the next one why I like to do this a little bit different way. But at least this way, you can see that what happens is the exception report has become much shorter. Now, if I deal with the past clients, so for example, let's say past client, I decide that is actually a valid value for my lookups. So let me go ahead and put that one in. Oh, wait a minute, I've got past client. I just forgot to turn it off. So back to my report, turn off past client as an exception. That row goes away. Then I just need to deal with these remaining ones. What are they? I don't know. If I double click, take a look at who's in there, and maybe now I can just sort of use whatever information I glean from looking at the list to determine, oh, those really should have been, X. These are really prospects, or these are suspects. In which case, again, I could just, fill in the proper contact type. Let's say these are all suspects. Oops, suspect. Just doing this sort of quickly, but usually you can have obviously whatever information you need drawn from GoldMine so that it's right there and you can determine what they ought to be. Even if you have to go down row by row and fill in an individual value there, suspect, prospect, customer, so on, you'd still get that done a lot faster than if you were needing to load up each record on the GoldMine side. So I'll just quickly do that because I want to illustrate a nice clean exception report. Okay, so that's done, and our exception report now, when we refresh, do it with the short menu this time, is empty. That is a beautiful exception report where everything, basically all the exceptions have been worked through and the data are fixed. Now what you don't see here, of course, is your report with the actual real values showing. Rather than mess up my exception report, what I'll do here is I'll clone this sheet. So I made a new sheet here over here that shows the full contact type, or that will show the full contact type field, and I'll just go in and turn off the exceptions, or turn off the display that way. I'm okay with overwriting that information over there, and I'll actually don't even need my groupings anymore, so I'll turn those off. And now I've got a nice simple matrix with all cleaned up contact type data. Now that's one field out of course, many in GoldMine. But what I've done here is I've made it so that I've got a much cleaner, much more meaningful report than the one that I started out with. If I had been creating a report that's broke down my leads. But secondly, or maybe sort of in parallel, I have this exception report that I can always come back to, and every time I open it up, it'll tell me if something is exceptional to my rules. And I, of course, have the tools to quickly fix whatever issues come up there. So this is the tool to get there. This tells us that we're there. We've got those all set up right. Now, I did want to mention also that I set this up with the sales rep field in the columns, and my reason for doing that is sometimes, of course, you, the person who's managing the data, are not the salesperson, so you don't really know what those values should be. Or even more importantly, you don't know, you may know what the values should be, but you're also using it to figure out, well, whose name are these coming up under? Who is the sales rep who's actually responsible for those leads? And how do I give them a nice list for them to fix the issue instead of me doing it with the tools? Now, I think this could be done a couple of ways. You can fix this with the tools, with the MasterMine tools. You can also send a list to, let's say Lori, just taking this as an example. Now I just cleaned up all of these, but suppose we were still looking at an exception report and Lori S has 87 records that need to be looked at, need to be fixed. Well, there's a couple of ways to send that to Lori so that she can get them cleaned up at the same time as getting the data cleaned up, she is also getting reinforced for her, hey, this is an important thing for you to do, and I'm going to bounce these back to you every time until you are doing it correctly. So, rather than have me do that, maybe Lori, what you really need to do is just open that exception report in your own GoldMine and get these things fixed. That's the best way, is to just simply deploy an exception report to her. However, recognizing that that doesn't always happen, sometimes what you do is do a drill down sheet listing all those ones that have issues with them, and then take a snapshot and send the snapshot to Lori and make her go through one by one and add those in. Now, is Lori really going to do that if she's a sales rep? Is she going to, if you assign her 87 things, records to look up and fix? Kind of doubtful, unless she's got tools that make it easy for her to traverse to those records one by one. So again, it's a good idea to just simply deploy the report to her GoldMine taskbar, let her open it up, and open it up just the same way that I illustrated here at the start here. Just tell her, hey, Lori, under your key reports tab in GoldMine, I've put this exceptions report. I want you to open that up every day, every week, whatever it's going to be, and make sure before we go and run the the TCP report that you make sure there are no exceptions on that report. That will be just a measure of how well you're doing your job, Lori. And it will also, the good news is it will also lead to your getting more sales, because cleaner data means better marketing, means more accurate calling, means eventually more sales in the door. Okay, so that's kind of a long explanation here on just a couple of, on just how you follow through on what you find in your exception reports. Now let's look at some additional exception reports. Remember, I mentioned that on my industry field, this is my second industry field report. Sorry, this is my second key field report that I did as an example before we got started here. And I set this one up in advance. It's just simply, to use it, you simply pop it open the way I did. And in this case, what I chose to do, instead of going in and hiding the value, the acceptable values, aviation, engineering, and so on, what I did was I grouped them together. How do you group those values together? Pretty simple. I'll go ahead and ungroup this just so I can illustrate it. So we're going to ungroup those. And all I did was I clicked on aviation and I control-clicked on the additional ones: engineering, food, media, retail store, and what else do I have? System design. So those are my, and pharmaceuticals. So those are my those are my accurate values. Those are the ones that are actually in my lookups. But all I did there was make a group of them. Now the value of having the group there is that you don't wind up with that two-step issue that I had on the other ones. In other words, as you clean these up and refresh, these will just simply move up into the acceptable rows, and in the end, when you've cleaned up the data that's in here, and I won't go through all the detail on that again, you wind up with just simply one item in column A that just says valid. Everything that's invalid is good. If it's not in the valid group, well, then somebody needs to drill through and deal with those. And if you decide afterwards, hey, NA is valid, we can always add that to the group, to the valid ones. Since there's only one group over here on the left-hand side, selecting an item and hitting add to group just adds it to that one. If I had multiple groups, you could choose which one. That all is sort of to the side, just sort of things to learn about using MasterMine there. So I'm going to pause a little bit. The questions dialog on MasterMine, on the GoToWebinar dialog is open. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put them in there. Carnegie has no compunctions about jumping in and interrupting me as I go along here. So if that is appropriate to do, she will interject the question. If not, we'll handle it there toward the end. This is pretty straightforward stuff in concept, but at the same time, I also want you to learn about using these tools to work with the data. Okay. Not seeing any questions on there right now. I'm going to proceed on with the next one. So going down that I'm not going to pull it up again. The PowerPoint. The next item on the PowerPoint was looking at fields where the value that's in there is dependent on other fields. So one example over here in GoldMine is last year sales. So these fields, year-to-date sales and last year sales, these are typically good fields to have in GoldMine that if you're a sales rep, allow you to know right away, where am I with these? Especially if you're a sales rep who's selling in a market where what you do is repeatedly sell to the same people, or hopefully have the opportunity for resales and upsales while you also bring in new customers. Pretty wide swath of GoldMine using organizations. So those are good fields to have, but how are you going to populate those accurately or meaningfully in any case? Now, you don't necessarily need to have down to the penny what did they buy last year or this year, year to date. But it's not too hard to get that information in if you want to. And again, these are MasterMine tools can help you to do that. If the data are in, and I'll get to how this relates to exception reports here in a moment, but but just so you know, people become very interested in having these kinds of fields and others that are relevant to the sale. And it's a good idea to just think in terms of data manipulation as your way of getting the best information in front of the people who need it when they need it. So if you are the kind of organization that when you complete a sale, you actually complete a sale in the history tab in GoldMine, but you don't expect your sales reps to actually go hunting down through the history tab to figure out, well, what have they bought from us in the past, and how much was it, and so on. It's a lot more useful to just have that simply summarized right up here at the top, so they don't need to do that hunting through history. And it's quite easy to take a MasterMine completed sales report and just simply transfer in the last year sales and year-to-date sales numbers using MMUpdater. That's about a 3-step process. I was going to go into that actually in this webinar and kind of talk myself out of it because I just thought, well, that's about a 3-minute or a 5-minute side trip to do that. It's quite easy to do, and if anybody is out there and you'd like for me to show you how that's done, by all means, send us an email at the end. You can send it to Carnegie, Carnegie at mastermind.net, or to me, Rob at mastermind.net, and I will be more than happy to show you how to set that up in your GoldMine.
And we will tell you how to spell my name to send it.
Oh, sorry, Carnegie, yes, Carneggy. You'll actually see her name. That's on my last slide. We'll have Carnegie's email address on it. So now, why do you want to do that? Let's get back to the exception report issue. So if somebody is listed here as customer or past customer, what's the line between a customer and a past customer? Somebody who's bought from us this year, somebody who's bought in the last 2 or 3 years. And why is that important? Well, it's important in part because of how you market to them. You probably are going to market to past customers. Hopefully you still are marketing to them, but you'll do that in a slightly different way than you market to current customers. Different messages, different frequencies, different, you name it. You're the marketing person. You decide what you want to do. As long as you are accurately categorizing the leads that are in your database. So if you're going to make, whether it says customer or past customer here, dependent on what it says in last year and this year sales, then obviously the way you're going to accomplish that is to do is either to do reporting that includes that last year sales information, or to actually do a history report that includes a history sales report that includes both of those things. That's actually what I'm going to illustrate here for you right now. I'm going to create a new MasterMine report that's going to show me last year's sales. Now, one other thing I want to mention while this is coming up, and that is this information doesn't necessarily need to only come from GoldMine. If you're not the kind of company that does completed sales in GoldMine, if you only do them in your ERP system, or you only do that in QuoteWorks, or you only do it in QuickBooks or Sage or whatever your accounting system is, that's fine actually, as long as there is identifiable information. There's two things. We want to be able to get that information out of that database again in Excel in some logical format. And by logical, I mean either one row per customer or a set of rows per customer that show the dollar amounts that are in there. And then secondly, that there is a way to link that information from the accounting system to GoldMine. And when I say a way to link it, what I mean is if your GoldMine database has a field in it that is the, let's say, the account number for that company in your ERP system or in your accounting system, then we can actually make that logical connection. If all you've got is the company name, but you've been very careful to keep the company names in GoldMine matching exactly with what's in your accounting system, again, that's a way we can pull that together so we can do the reporting, use Excel sort of as a medium where you get the information out of the accounting system into Excel and then are able to drive it into the appropriate places here in GoldMine. All of that can be done. Again, contact us if you'd like for some help in doing that kind of thing. So that said, I'm going to do this in sort of the simplest form, which is if you are actually scheduling pending sales for forecasting purposes and then completing them in GoldMine also so that you've got your history of sales. We're going to assume that for the moment. And I'll just go ahead and generate a completed sales report for GoldMine. So pretty simple stuff when you're creating a MasterMine report. In this case, we're talking about the history tab, so it's history focused information. So I'm doing that. Our previous reports that we were working with were just simply built using the main contact option. In this case, it's history and specifically the sales type of history. I won't bother with going to get additional fields here. I'm just going to say finish, and we'll generate a completed sales history report. It's something that everybody here on the call ought to be able to do. And by the way, if you're not, one of the other things is, if you as an organization have chosen in the past not to do your not to do your completed sales in GoldMine because you thought, why bother? Or why should we have it in there? The answer is, if it's there, it's easy to work with and it informs your salespeople and helps them make more sales. Now, if that answer is not true for you, okay, you can go right past this. But if it is true, and the thing that's really held you back is we didn't know how to use the information once it was there. Now I'm giving you the tools that will make it possible for you to do that, to make value out of having that information in GoldMine. Okay, completed sales report. Now this is month and year, and actually when I drag the years down here, so we've got a fairly short period of time that these sales cover, or that, let's say, GoldMine theoretically has been used for 18 months ending in October of 2004, something like that. But in any case, it doesn't really matter. What I'm going to be able to do here is take the information that's here. Let's assume for the moment that this is 2014. I don't have any data for 2015. Let's assume that this year right now is 2014. And so this is our year-to-date sales right there. Now, if I wanted to look at these by the individual companies, it would be a pretty straightforward thing to just simply, assuming I've got my mouse working properly, to drag the company field in here and show, here's all our sales. This is last year's sales. This is this year's sales by company. How many things did they buy, or how many purchases did they make? How many units did they buy total? And what's the dollar amount? And all the other detail is right there if we wanted to do this by product and so on. So, and by the way, doing it by product often will make sense, especially if you want to have 3 fields at the top of your GoldMine for your 3 different products indicating how much did they buy last year of each of the 3. Again, a simple and easy thing to do. Here, let's just kind of do it for illustration purposes. Now I'm still just going to, when I do my transfer into my GoldMine, I'm going to assume that I'm only going to do for all of them. But if they are buying widgets, we could group their widgets together. and the gadgets they can potentially buy could also be grouped. And there, for reporting purposes, I've got a nice simple report. These other ones, these are actually QuoteWorks links. QuoteWorks, of course, is going to work a little bit differently. So those of you who don't have QuoteWorks, you don't need to worry about that too much. I'm just going to group those just to simplify it here. So pretty simple summary of our sales. And I'm just going to look at the completed sales. I'm going to ignore the lost sales, which, by the way, with completed and the lost, again, if you're keeping the information in GoldMine, you can do success ratios, you can do close ratios, you can do sales cycle analysis, all sorts of things. What I'm going to focus on here is this year's sales. So pretty easily, I could just drill down on the widget sales for this year and have that number for each company fill in the this year sales numbers. I'm going to do this actually for all sales because all I've got is a single this year sales number. And 2 steps to doing this. Again, you MasterMine users, you should be able to follow this pretty much step by step to do this. So in effect, all I'm going to do here is I've drilled down, so I know that all of my sales are represented here, all the sales for each different company, but there may be multiple sales within a single company. So I'm going to use a little tool inside of Updater to accomplish that. Namely, we're going to be updating the contact 1 field. We're going to be updating the last year sales. Whoops, sorry, this is a contact. Last year sales is a contact 2 user defined field. So we're going to be updating the last year sales. Oops, I was on this year, wasn't I? So let's go with this year, or year to date. Year to date field with the contents of the amount column. You don't see it here on the screen, but it's over on the right someplace. So I'm going to go and move this down and get the amount. And I'm going to take this off of test run. And now I could hit the OK button, but I've got one issue here to think about, and that is, as I mentioned before, multiple sales per company. So we don't want it to just show the last sale that they did, although we could. I mean, we could have a last sale field in the GoldMine as well and be filling that in. But in this case, what I want it to do is really total up all the ones that are all the sales for the same company into a field. So I'm going to use a setting in here that adds numbers to the existing field data. Now, there's if we've already populated that, that could potentially be an issue, but you'll see here in a moment how it's not going to be an issue because Updater is going to recognize that you've already got data in those fields, and it will ask you, do you want to actually clear those out before you run this? Now, it just does that as a consequence of the fact that you checked this field on, add numbers to the existing field data. So that's basically all I need to do. I'm going to go ahead and hit the OK button. And whoops, I guess the question didn't come up. So I guess it just automatically cleared out that field. So now when I say OK, and I go to Premdor Systems, you can see what it did. It added, the first time it encountered Premdor Systems, it added 8747 to the total. And then the second time it encountered it, it actually added the amount to what was already there. So adding those two together, that's about $20,000. And assuming that Premdor Systems doesn't come up again, when we drill down there, we should have a value in the year-to-date sales. Okay. I don't think I did my calculation very well there. But in any case, that should be my year-to-date sales. Did I get the right field? I think I did. I think my numbers just might not be reflecting correctly on in the log sheet. Anyway, that's the more or less straightforward way of populating your year-to-date sales as well as your last year sales. And then again, for the exception report, you would turn around and include the year-to-date sales field in your report. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with my existing exceptions report. I'm just going to extend it, make an additional example of it. And so this is going to be, last year sales. And remember, the reason that I'm doing this is if they had sales last year, I want them to be considered a customer. If they didn't have sales last year, I want them to be considered something else, last year or this year for that matter. So in order to do this, I'm going to need to include a field that I didn't include when I created this, namely my last year sales field. So I'm going to add a field here, and I'm going to choose, again, for my contact 2, the last year sales, LY, oh, there it was. There we go, last year sales. And add it to the report. And the reason that I want to do that is, so and I want to double check that I'm doing this on a copy of that other report, so I'm not going to overwrite my industry field report. This is just going to wind up being a variation on it. So last year sales, the ones that are 0, those should not be customers. Everything that's not 0 should show up as a customer, let's say. Now you could also do this a different way, that last year sales above a certain threshold, or whatever you want to do. I'm going to put in the contact type. Okay, it's mislabeled record type here. That's actually my contact type field. So the contact type field, I'm going to show those, and we're going to indicate, so some of those are showing as past clients, even though they bought from us last year. I probably am going to want to change. Now the ones that say 0 for last year, that's fine. Those can stay past clients. But all these ones that are above 0, I'm going to want those. I'll just highlight them here. Those really should be past clients. And again, drill down, change this to say client or customer, and then do your update or change. And so essentially what we've done there is apply some logic rather than just simply looking for invalid values from the lookups, but apply logic from internal to the database to assign them. Now that logic, sort of in the course of doing this, I've followed through the other types of examples that I wanted to show you here. So not only do we do this based on this other field, this last year sales field, but we also kind of applied the fact that we had history activity as a way of updating that last year sales and making it in a sort of a 2-step process, getting us to where we have the proper values in the contact type. The other thing that I wanted to mention about that, the business rule or the process means of looking for exceptions, was to talk about not just where you are using the logic of, did they buy from us last year, but you also might consider somebody an active prospect versus an inactive one based on how recently did somebody call them. And again, it's very easy to make reports that show, when was the last time somebody in our organization had an actual contact with somebody at that organization, and divide up your prospects that way as well. You want probably very different marketing messages, very different phone calling or outreach programs happening if you've got somebody who is what you consider an active prospect versus somebody who's an inactive one. So again, it's a matter of labeling them properly and then using your exception reports to make sure that the labels over time stay accurate. There are, of course, 2 different kinds of labels. The one that says what industry are they in, that's not going to change over time. That's just a matter of finding the ones that are blank. But there are labels that change over time. Are they a customer or past customer? Are they an active prospect or an inactive one? Your exception reports can keep you accurately focused on the right people with the right messages all the time. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover today in terms of the logic behind exception reports. I hope you also picked up well about, once you create exception reports, how important it is to deploy those to the proper users so that they actually use those exception reports, and at the same time inform them about why it is in their interest as a sales rep or as a office person or whatever it is, why it is in their interest to use that exception report to keep the GoldMine data accurate and current. Collectively, as a company, if you've got that as part of your culture, having accurate GoldMine data, that will vastly improve the likelihood of success with GoldMine and success generally doing the business that you're doing. So that's content-wise, that's the main things that I wanted to talk about today. Let's do a quick summary here. I also want to see if there are any questions. I don't see that any questions have come up in the question panel, but please go ahead and drop those in if you've got some that you want to ask. Meanwhile, I'm going to go to back over here to sum up here. There we go. So I wanted to say here, just kind of in wrapping up, if you do not already have exception reports, or if you feel that what I've shown you today is a little bit, the simple stuff might be simple and the harder stuff you want some help with, you MasterMine users are typically you have support units that will allow you to have us get online with you and help you do that work to get set up with these. If you are not currently a MasterMine user, give us a call and we'll be happy to set you up with a free exception report. We'll install MasterMine on your side in demo mode, set up an exception report, help you get some sort of a key measure going on your GoldMine, and hopefully that will illustrate for you the ways that you can really take advantage of MasterMine to have a much more successful experience with GoldMine. Let's see. Oh, that's right. I did want to kind of indicate this to you. Further information about MasterMine and about getting support, as well as recordings of past MasterMine webinars and recordings of a huge number of recordings of short tutorials and so on, are available from www.mastermine.net. If you have specific questions or want to take us up on any of the offers that I've mentioned today, Carnegie's email address is right there at the bottom, as well as our toll-free number. Hit extension 1 and you'll talk with Carnegie, or if you're already working with a MasterMine, one of our MasterMine account reps, then by all means contact them. So, Carnegie, do you have? I think I see
questions that came up.
Yes.
There's one question about the session being recorded, and it has been recorded, and it will be sent out tomorrow, about 24 hours from now.
Okay.
With a link to that recording.
Yep, and in the future, when you get invitations from us, we have had a number of people ask us about this. In the future, when you get invitations from us for webinars, we make it a policy to record them and make the recordings available. We don't technically. There's some danger that we won't always get those. Get the recording or not have a good quality recording. So apologize if that ever happens to you, that you sign up. And with sort of counting on the recording to do it for you, but usually it should work. Any other questions come up, Carnegie? Thought we had a very fertile topic today, and a lot of people signed up to come see, so very grateful for that. Thank you all very much for taking the time to watch with us today. Oh, you know what? We did not put up our slide for doing our drawing. Carnegie, should we go ahead and do a drawing and give away a free half hour?
Let's do it.
All right. I knew you were on edge for that. We've got a couple of minutes left till our hour's up anyway. Okay, so while Carnegie is preparing to draw the name of the winner, this is just to say that essentially what we do every month for you attendees is, if you attend MasterMine, the MasterMine webinar to its conclusion, we give away a free half-hour consulting session where I'll get online with you and help you get something done. Could be set up an exception report, could be work through some data, whatever is most useful thing for you. And with that, Carnegie.
All right. Our winner today is Stephanie Nelson.
Stephanie Nelson, congratulations, Stephanie. And Carnegie, I assume that you'll be contacting her?
I will give you a call after the webinar, Stephanie.
Okay. All right, sounds good. Those of you who are not the big lucky winner today, don't despair. You have lots of opportunity for us to work with you online to get things done. If you're MasterMine users, of course, use those support units. Many of you have them on account and are ready to and can be, can have us doing lots of things for you. It doesn't need to be something that takes up a lot of your time. That's kind of the point, really, is that when you have an information need, get online and get it fixed right away. And the MasterMine tools are there to do it, and you have our expertise at your disposal. All right, with that, Carnegie, unless I've forgotten something.
I think you got it all.
All righty then. Thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. A pleasure to show you this. Feel free to send us topic suggestions for future events. And happy selling out there.
Bye, everyone.